Picture this. Two people vanish without a trace, not just misplaced, but completely gone. 8 years pass before they're discovered, not in wilderness terrain, not beneath water, but inside a sealed underground chamber, closed from within. They sit peacefully against stone walls beside each other, appearing to rest in eternal slumber, yet they have passed away, and their leg bones show severe damage. This isn't fiction about supernatural creatures. This is the true account of Sarah and Andrew, a tale of how a simple 3-day getaway became an 8-year puzzle with an answer more chilling than anyone anticipated. Sarah and Andrew lived as any typical pair in Colorado. She had reached 26, he was 28. They weren't adrenaline seekers or wilderness experts, simply two individuals deeply in love who desired time away from urban life. Their intentions couldn't have been simpler. Take their dependable vehicle, travel to Utah's desert regions, establish camp for 3 days and 2 nights, capture photographs of natural beauty, and enjoy each other's company. They selected a location near former uranium extraction sites from the mid-1900s. Today, only empty tunnels, corroded machinery, and paths absent from current maps remain. For them, this represented something different, a chance to witness unusual sights and create distinctive photographs. They sought no thrills, certainly no danger. Friday morning before departure, Sarah messaged her sister, "Heading out now, returning Sunday night, much love." This became the final communication their families received. They gathered standard camping supplies, water, provisions, shelter, sleeping equipment, basic tourist gear. No specialized exploration tools were packed since they planned only surface activities, hoping to witness desert sunsets. Sunday evening arrived. Sarah and Andrew failed to return home. Initially, nobody felt alarmed. Perhaps delays occurred. Communication issues arose. These situations happen. But when both missed Monday work obligations, relatives raised concerns. Phone calls went straight to messaging services. Friends confirmed their Utah destination near historic mining areas. Families immediately contacted authorities, launching search operations that same day. Hope filled everyone initially. Officers, volunteers, dozens of people swept the region. Utah's desert spans enormous, seemingly endless territory. Canyons, stone formations, dried waterways. Locating two individuals here resembles finding tiny objects in vast spaces. Search teams in vehicles and all-terrain units examined every known and forgotten path. Aircraft circled overhead for hours, seeking any indication: transportation, camping equipment, fire remains. Days passed without discoveries, no evidence whatsoever. Nobody had observed their vehicle or encountered a couple matching their description. They seemed to have disappeared completely upon leaving their hometown. Hope diminished daily. Desert conditions show no mercy to errors. Daytime heat becomes unbearable while nights turn frigid. Without adequate water or after becoming lost, survival chances decrease rapidly. Authorities considered alternative explanations. Perhaps they never reached Utah. Maybe they chose to flee and begin fresh lives elsewhere. This theory quickly crumbled. Bank accounts remained untouched, credit cards unused. They'd left pets at home with neighbor care arrangements. People planning permanent disappearance don't make such provisions. Criminal activity seemed unlikely too. The area held virtually no population, truly isolated territory. Random encounter probability was extremely minimal. Search efforts continued nearly 1 week. Volunteers and family members persisted while police prepared to reduce active operations. Then, on day 7, when hope nearly vanished, an aircraft pilot spotted reflected sunlight. Not merely reflection, flashing signals. Sarah and Andrew's vehicle was located. It sat on one of those abandoned tracks barely visible from ground level. The route led toward former uranium sites, ending after several miles. The car occupied the middle of the pathway, appearing simply left behind. The first detail noticed by arriving personnel was hazard lighting. Battery power was nearly depleted, lights dimly flickering. This seemed unusual. Hazard signals activate during breakdowns or emergency stops, meaning when the vehicle halted, Sarah and Andrew stood beside it. Police examined the automobile. No break-in signs existed, no accident damage. Doors remained unlocked. Interior conditions suggested owners had stepped away momentarily. An area map lay on the passenger seat near an empty water container. Andrew's mobile phone was discovered in the storage compartment. Specialists later verified no missed communications existed, no emergency service attempts or contact with close individuals. Battery held more than half charge. The most significant finding was the navigation device. It remained active, displaying a route continuing along this desolate road toward one of the former mining sites. This discovery brought hope while raising additional questions. Why hadn't they called? Perhaps cellular reception simply didn't exist in that location, and they understood this. But then, why abandon the vehicle? Police checked the fuel tank. Completely empty. This explained their stop. They'd run out of gasoline. They activated hazard lights for visibility. This made sense. But where did they go next? And why did the navigator indicate a specific mining location? Maybe they hoped to find assistance there, or shelter from intense sun. The search team, encouraged by this breakthrough, immediately proceeded along the route shown by the navigation system. They walked a barely visible trail scorched by sunlight. Not a soul existed around, only wind and echoing desert silence. After walking several miles, they reached their destination, the opening to a former uranium extraction site. An ordinary, unremarkable descent into rock, scattered with rusty debris and weathered wood pieces. The opening was narrow but allowed human passage. Searchers carefully examined surroundings but found nothing. No traces, no belongings, no recent human presence indicators. Wind and sand from recent days could have covered footprints. Rescuers called their names multiple times into the mine's darkness, but only silence responded. Proceeding deeper without proper equipment posed deadly risks. Former mining sites are maze-like, where collapses can occur instantly, or accumulated gases might cause poisoning. Surrounding area searches also produced nothing. They combed every meter within miles of both the vehicle and mine opening. No camping equipment, no sleeping gear, no fire evidence, nothing at all. This was inexplicable. If fuel had run out, logical action would involve establishing camp beside the car and awaiting assistance. If they'd sought help, they would have taken basic supplies like water. But all their essential equipment, shelter, sleeping materials, food supplies, had simply vanished, just like Sarah and Andrew themselves. After this discovery, active searching continued several more days unsuccessfully. Police couldn't send personnel deep into unstable underground areas without direct evidence the couple was inside. This would create unjustified risks. Gradually, search operations concluded. Sarah and Andrew's case received missing persons classification. Their photographs appeared on community boards and local publications. Families hired private investigators, but even these professionals couldn't develop new leads. Months became years. Sarah and Andrew's story transformed into one of those dark tales shared around campfires, a mystery covered in desert dust. It seemed nobody would ever learn what had happened to them, The empty tank vehicle and navigator pointing toward a dark opening in stone remained the only silent witnesses to their final journey. For 8 long years, complete silence surrounded this case. 8 years later, for most people, Sarah and Andrew's story had become another unsolved mystery, a sad reminder of wilderness dangers. Families continued living with unhealed wounds, without answers, without even the possibility of laying their loved ones to rest. The case gathered dust in archives under cold case labels. It would have remained so except for 2 local residents who in 2019 decided to earn extra income collecting scrap metal. These individuals weren't detectives or adventurers. They simply knew abandoned equipment remained in former uranium mining areas that could be processed and sold. One hot autumn day, they drove their pickup truck along the same forgotten roads where the missing couple's car had once been found. Their destination was the very mine Andrew's navigator had indicated, not because they knew this detail, but simply because it was a large site where they expected to find substantial metal. Arriving at the entrance, they saw what searchers had witnessed 8 years earlier, an opening in rock littered with debris. But something was wrong. The entrance, previously just cluttered with refuse, now appeared sealed. Someone had moved a large, rusty sheet of thick metal here and secured it somehow, piling stones and beams on top. This seemed strange. Usually, mines either remain open or get sealed with concrete and warning signs. This looked as if someone had hastily but securely tried to hide something or prevent entry. For metal collectors, this sheet itself was valuable. They'd brought cutting equipment. They spent several hours in heat cutting an opening large enough to crawl through. When they finally finished, the opening released musty, cold, completely still air, the kind existing only in places sealed for many years. One man shone a powerful flashlight inside. Initially, the beam revealed only bare stone walls covered with dust and floors scattered with small rocks. The shaft extended straight into rock. He moved the beam further, peering into darkness. Then the light stopped. At the far end of this small first chamber, about 15 meters from the entrance, were 2 figures. They were simply sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, heads slightly lowered. They sat very close together. The man with the flashlight didn't immediately understand what he was seeing. Perhaps mannequins or some debris resembling people from distance. He called his partner. His partner also looked inside and froze. Both stared silently into darkness. Then one quietly said, "Those are people." No panic occurred, just shock. The poses seemed too peaceful. No blood existed, no struggle signs, just 2 people who appeared to have sat down to rest in cool air and fallen asleep. But both understood. People don't sleep in sealed mines. They immediately drove several miles until getting cellular signal and contacted police. News of the discovery shook the entire state. Police officers who'd worked Sarah and Andrew's case 8 years prior immediately recognized the location being described. Investigation teams and forensic specialists were dispatched to the site. Working inside proved difficult. Air was stale, and the place felt oppressive in its silence. The scene exactly matched the metal collector's description. 2 people, a man and woman, sitting against the wall. Their clothes, ordinary hiking attire, had deteriorated with age but weren't torn. No personal belongings surrounded them. No backpacks, no water, nothing. Just bare rock and dust. Bodies were heavily preserved due to dry mine air, which had maintained them in this position. Sarah and Andrew's families were informed of the terrible discovery. Soon, DNA analysis confirmed what everyone already knew. It was them. The 8-year search had ended. The mystery of their whereabouts was solved, but from that moment, a new, even more terrifying mystery began. What had happened to them inside that mine? Investigation commenced with detailed scene and body examination. Immediately, several oddities emerged that didn't fit logical explanation. First, no injuries existed on bodies or clothing indicating attack. No cuts, no wounds, no struggle signs. Second, the scene itself. They were sitting calmly. It didn't appear they were panicking, trying to escape, or calling for help. They were just sitting there. But the most important and shocking fact was established by the medical examiner during examination. Both Sarah and Andrew had broken bones in their legs, multiple fractures of shins and feet. These were serious injuries that couldn't have occurred naturally. Such damage results from falling from great height. But how did this align with the absence of other injuries and their calm posture? Then investigators noticed the mine's structure itself. The passage metal collectors had opened was horizontal, but above where Sarah and Andrew sat was another opening in the ceiling, a vertical shaft leading upward toward the surface. A new theory began emerging, and it was terrifying. Sarah and Andrew hadn't entered the mine through the side entrance. They had fallen into it. They fell through the vertical shaft, possibly hidden by vegetation or boards on the surface. They dropped several meters and landed on stone flooring, breaking their legs. They were alive but immobilized. They couldn't stand, couldn't go anywhere. They were trapped. But this theory only explained the injuries. It didn't explain the main question: who sealed the side exit, and why? Investigators carefully examined the metal sheet that sealed the entrance. Examination showed it was welded to rock using professional welding equipment. Moreover, the welding method indicated it had been done from inside. But no equipment was found inside the mine. No welding machine, no generator, not even simple tools. Nothing. This was impossible. Someone entered the mine, welded the only exit from inside, then simply vanished without leaving any tools behind. The lack of struggle signs now seemed even more sinister. If they'd been attacked, they would have fought back. But if they'd fallen and broken their legs, they were completely helpless. Anyone who found them in that condition could have done anything to them. And someone did. Someone found them wounded and helpless. Instead of helping them, that someone decided to entomb them alive. He dragged a metal sheet to the side exit and welded it shut, condemning Sarah and Andrew to slow death in complete darkness from hunger and thirst. The thought was so monstrous it was hard to believe. This wasn't negligence or accident. It was cold-blooded and cruel elimination that lasted for days. Police realized they weren't looking for any random criminal. They were seeking someone who knew the area well, someone who knew about this mine's existence, knew about the vertical descent and side exit. Perhaps he himself had set the trap on the surface they'd fallen into. And he knew how to cover his tracks and leave unnoticed, perhaps through some other narrow crevice or ventilation shaft known only to him. The case went from cold to highest priority investigation. Now police had a goal: find the individual who had turned the old mine into a tomb for 2 innocent people. And this person was still out there somewhere. Police worked the case for 2 years. The suspect list was very short. Who could have known so much about these mines? Who could have had welding equipment and skills to use it in such a remote area? Investigators began what they should have done in 2011. They started researching all property and lease records for these abandoned lands. Most mines belonged to nobody, but some plots, including where Sarah and Andrew died, were on long-term lease to a private individual. He was a man in his 60s who lived alone on a small ranch several dozen miles away. He'd been leasing the land for many years, ostensibly for geological research, though he didn't actually conduct any real activity there. Neighbors described him as antisocial and secretive, who didn't like when anyone appeared on his property. He'd repeatedly clashed with tourists or hunters who accidentally wandered onto his land. For police, this was the first real lead they'd had in all this time. They obtained a search warrant for his home and property. The man himself, the property leaseholder, greeted police without surprise, but with poorly concealed hostility. He denied everything, claiming he knew nothing about any missing tourists and hadn't been in that mine area for many years. But during a search of his workshop, investigators found something that silenced him. Hanging on a nail among a pile of old tools was a bunch of keys to old locks on gates that blocked some mine entrances. And in a desk drawer, under a pile of old bills, lay a yellowed sheet of paper rolled into a tube. It wasn't just an area map. It was a detailed diagram of internal passages of several mines, including that one. The diagram marked not only the main entrance and vertical shaft, but also several narrow ventilation tunnels that even mine supervision services didn't know about. One of these tunnels led to the surface almost a mile from the main entrance. This was the answer to how the perpetrator could have disappeared after sealing the exit from inside. He had his own secret way out. When shown this diagram, the man realized denial was useless, and he spoke. But it wasn't remorse. He told his version of events dryly and emotionlessly. That day, he was patrolling his territory and heard screams. He followed the sound and found two people in the mine. They had fallen into an old pit he himself had once covered with rotten boards to keep animals out. He saw they were alive but injured. They were on his land, strangers, trespassers. In his twisted mind, they weren't victims but a problem. He didn't talk to them. He just walked away silently. He returned to his ranch, took welding equipment and a generator, loaded everything into his pickup truck, and drove to the mine's side entrance. He didn't consider himself to be eliminating them. In his logic, he was simply securing his property. He welded the exit shut so that outsiders would no longer climb where they shouldn't. He admitted blocking the entrance but denied wrongdoing to the end, insisting they were to blame because they had trespassed on his property. He simply locked the door behind the trespassers. The fact that two wounded people were dying in darkness and agony behind that door didn't seem to concern him. The trial was brief. Evidence was more than sufficient. Prosecutors didn't bring direct charges of intentional elimination. It was difficult to prove he wanted them dead. The official version, as stated in the verdict, was intentional abandonment in danger resulting in death of two persons. For finding wounded Sarah and Andrew, and instead of helping them, condemning them to painful death by sealing them in a stone chamber, he received 18 years in prison. The mystery that had tormented everyone for almost 10 years was solved. Behind this terrible and inexplicable disappearance were neither mystical desert forces nor dangerous criminals from movies. There was only one person, a person whose paranoid hatred of strangers proved stronger than ordinary human compassion. The story of Sarah and Andrew ended not on the day they disappeared, not even on the day their bodies were found. It ended the moment justice named the person who left them to perish in the cold darkness of an abandoned mine. Their memory serves as a reminder that sometimes the greatest dangers in the wilderness come not from nature itself, but from the darkness that can exist in human hearts.